Live? Okay. We are live on YouTube and otherwise ready to rock and roll.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. This is our second of two planned postmortems for the pair of events we had over uh, last weekend, the May 9th, May 10th 2-day span there. The first one was obviously the security issue that we discussed yesterday. Today, we're going to be talking about the slowdown in the blockchain and the patch that Mariano was able to put in, as well as just kind of dive into some technical detail around that, and let you guys know exactly what the patch fixed and if there's any other remediation that needs to be done going forward. As with yesterday, I'm going to link the document that's been linked to the invite. I will link it again here in the chat just to be sure that we're all working from the same notes. And I'm not going to share the document because I think that's kind of boring, but we will have time again at the end for questions, and please follow along in the document if you wish to. So approximately 6:48 a.m. PDT on May 9th, 2021, the blockchain stopped creating blocks at height 255.108 for approximately 45 minutes. It then advanced very slowly for the next 3 hours until the hotfix was released. We were not checking for negative values in the uint64 constructor. We were instead checking and then serializing. Therefore, the coins with negative values were added to the mempool, and these blocks passed validation, but they did not get added to the blockchain due to the negative value not serializing correctly with the uint64 stream. Farmers making these blocks would make blocks that did not make it into or advance the chain, causing most farmers to be unable to create valid transaction blocks. Fortunately, no invalid blocks were added to the blockchain. The fix adds a check to the mempool and block validation, and did not disconnect peers who sent these invalid blocks, any peer on 1.1.4. You will have seen these messages in your logging if you have it set to warning, I believe, perhaps info. I don't remember what exact level they were at, but you will see this peer is sending me a negative coin, along with a few other, I didn't connect this peer for basically what we would consider malbehavior in the past. Because of the mismatch between 1.1.4 and 1.1.5. A lot of the questions we see in support are to that, and that was unfortunately something we had to do in order to remain, to not have to hard fork from that 1.1.4 version. But we do hope that as people upgrade, that will become less and less common. And especially because we will be releasing in the future the pool update that will have a pretty good carrot there for update across the platform. We hope that we can all but eliminate 1.1.4 and the errors that come with it. So a rough timeline is that at 12:48, 6:48 PDT, 12:48 being in UTC, the last transaction block was at 255.105, and then it advanced slowly to 25108. At 13:11, Mariano looked at the local node and realized status was not synced. This means that there have been no transactions in more than 7 minutes. He checked the public Keybase chat, saw that many people have detected the same issue, and we're stuck at 255.108. At 13:12, he notified the Chia engineers that the blockchain was stuck and not moving forward. Almag and Arvid joined to help debug. We started debugging and noticed that there were many compact proof time messages. He created a no compact branch, which commented out the handling of these optional messages. At 13:26, some of the medium-sized farmers started beginning to run the no compact branch. At 13:32, we made a post in the announcement telling people to update to the no compact branch if they are running from Git, continuing to debug. At 13:43, the blockchain started to move forward slowly to a height of 255.111. At 13:45, we noticed the logs of block creation with a warning consensus error validating the block too large to convert. After debugging and adding logs, we noticed there was an invalid coin amount in block 221.0509T230201.463. This was a full node, Chia full node chain store error coin amount negative, a very large integer. At 14:19, at the 1.1.4 hotfix branch was created. with a change to not accept valid blocks. I believe that should say invalid blocks. I apologize for the typo there. He modified the public announcement to tell people to download this branch. The blockchain started moving slowly with large gaps between blocks. Between 1420 and 20200, through the next 2 hours, we checked there were no negative coins added to the blockchain. They added a patch to reject these from the mempool, and they added a patch to not disconnect the old peers who sent bad transactions, which is what I alluded to in the preamble. They also confirmed that the new code synced up successfully, and there were no consensus changes. At 1718, the final release was published, including the Mac and Windows installers, and an announcement was made to notify users to upgrade. We were then on version 1.1.5, which we feel recovered the blockchain into a healthy state enterprise-wide. The root cause, as mentioned before, is that uint64, the class in itself in the blockchain Python code, should only represent numbers 0 to 2 to the 64th power minus 1. However, the constructor did not throw an error when passing a negative value. The validation happened at a later point when serializing. This means that it was possible to create a coin with a negative value. Furthermore, both the mempool validation and the block validation did not check for negative coins. This led to a few things happening. The transaction with a negative addition was added to the mempool and propagated to all nodes. Farmers created blocks adding this transaction into a block, and then the unfinished block validated successfully. When VDF were added to these blocks to create finished blocks, the finished blocks were not able to be added to the blockchain because when trying to serialize the negative value, an exception would be thrown. That goes back to the negative, very large integer error that we mentioned in the timeline. The reason why no valid blocks were added to the chain is that when we serialize coins for inclusion into the DB, we call uint64.stream, which failed with negative values. Therefore, the state transition failed and the node reverted back to the last solid block 255108. The validation was happening, but it was happening after propagating transactions to blocks instead of before. This is the root cause of all the errors and the blockchain stall, is that the check did its job, it just did it too late, and there was already bad data in the ecosystem. Luckily, that was not added to the blockchain because of the checking was implemented. There was an assumption made about the timing. The reason this caused issues in the blockchain moving is that all the farmers would try to include this negative transaction into their blocks, and this transaction did not get cleared from the mempool. There is a fallback to creating an empty block if the farmer realizes that they have not made a block with valid transactions to prevent these type of issues. However, since the validated block did not check for negative coin values, the farmer did not realize the blocks were invalid and broadcast them as a negative coin. I'll turn over to Mariano now to talk about the resolution and recovery, and then we'll go into the lessons learned after he kind of lets you guys know what the fixes they put in place.
Hello, everyone. So there's a few different fixes that we made to ensure that the blockchain kept moving at a good speed. So the blockchain should move approximately at about 1 block per 18 seconds, but we experienced about 45 minutes with no blocks. So after the update, it took a while to get back to normal speed because those that hadn't updated couldn't actually participate in farming. So the actual fix was, there were 3 components. The first component was checking for invalid values in transactions. So when the farmer receives a transaction, it first checks that it has no invalid values. That means that the transaction will never go into the mempool. The mempool is kind of the pool of transactions that the farmer keeps around to prepare for making a block. So that was the first fix. Don't accept negative values into the mempool. So you would then create valid blocks. The second fix was to reject blocks that have negative value transactions in them. So when you receive a block from a different farmer, if they have a negative value coin, we should reject that block because it's not valid. So we would do this check here as opposed to checking it after validation. But those two fixes are not enough because we would then disconnect. We would disconnect the farmer that sends us invalid transactions or send us invalid blocks. So we had to add a specific check in 1.1.5 that said that if a farmer sends us a block with a negative value, we reject that block, but we don't disconnect them. And the reason is we don't want to disconnect old peers from the network. We want people who haven't updated to still be able to participate in the network, to be able to validate, send transactions, etc. Even if they're connected, they might not be able to farm because they're still including these negative value transactions, but they would at least not be disconnected. So we didn't have a fork in the blockchain. We didn't have a chain split or a network split. All peers are still connected. But the peers that hadn't updated would not be able to farm properly. They might have some issues farming and getting rewards. So that is why we encourage everyone to update pretty quickly to 1.1.5. And people over the next 2 days after making this release, most people had updated. Although we still kept seeing some errors in the logs from people who had not updated. So that is the summary of the release. The net space dropped maybe 15-20% after this incident, but it recovered very quickly after the release. And yeah, that's it.
And then did you want to just touch on the kind of the process improvements that you settled on along with the code improvements that we released in 1.1.5?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Could you just the lessons learned in the improvements section? Could you just touch on that?
So the main reason why this bug made it in was we had these class for UN64, UN32 that are pretty old code that we just kind of assumed worked. And we never actually wrote a test for this file. So we need to have higher standards, and we decided to have higher standards when approving new code, that it needs to be tested and it needs to go through review. So this was mostly due to a lack of testing of this old code. Over the next few weeks and few months, we want to add more tests and have tests that check both passing things and failing things. So negative tests that test all directions in which the code can fail. Also, we want to minimize the number of different data types and data structures used and standardize that in the code. We would like to do a bug bounty in order to get people in the community more involved and just more eyes on the code to prevent these types of issues. We want to have more automated alarms when issues arise. So as I said, blocks should come every 18 seconds approximately. We did have an alarm, but it didn't function properly. So we need to have alarms that alert all the relevant people that can quickly fix these things. So this kind of still happens again, we need to get on it as quickly as possible. So in this case, we got on it about 20 to 30 minutes after it happened. So that's another 20 or 30 minutes we could have saved if we had more efficient alerts. We also need to have an incident response plan, which we started working on to basically decide the chain of who we want to notify and how we notify these people. And we also would like to have a status page to track the current block, the current latest height and when it was. I mean, right now we can use chiastatus.com, chiaexplorer.com. These sites all show this value, but it'd be good to have one that is also very well tested and resilient. Another one of the final lessons learned is to add a notification in the GUI when a new version is available. So one of the challenges that we have is that with so many users joining, it's very hard to get people to update. We got kind of lucky in this regard for this issue because this update was not mandatory. You can still kind of farm and stay connected with the old version, although it could decrease your rewards significantly. But it wasn't like a chain split update, hard fork update, which is mandatory. So for those emergency updates, having a notification in the GUI might be a very useful feature to have. However, it's not that simple because we need to make sure that if we add a feature like that, we don't introduce any centralization vectors. Because the Chia client should not rely on a server for any central operations and should not do any sort of auto updating for decentralization purposes. But these are some of the things we're thinking about moving forward so we can recover more quickly in the case of another incident like this one.
Thank you.
I'd also add that we've had one or two incidences during the alpha and beta stages, and actually I think one in the RC stage as well. So that was one of the things that actually went right, is that we did actually have some practice at this set of problems. So
Yes, we, it seems we, for both of these issues, we got about as lucky as we could have hoped. And so, you know, we're aware of that, and we're taking steps to make sure that we don't need to get lucky next time to have a small blast radius. As Mariano mentioned, we're improving our operations process. One of my guys is in the final stages of a new status page and a new like health check bot for the blockchain itself, using status from the Time Lord and things like that. So, you know, these are things that we have quickly put into motion, and we should have out into the community very shortly, as you know, to address this problem, so that we won't have, as Mariano mentioned, we won't have to wait that 30 minutes to know things are bad before we can jump to action to fix it.
So I'll ask the question that's currently pending in the question pile. Do we have an opinion on whether this was an intentional attack to create a negative value, or was it potentially a, you know, fuzzing, you know, white hat thing, or was it just a bug that we have somewhere that generated this value?
In my opinion, it was one of the likely scenarios is that it was someone experimenting and making different types of transactions, and it was not an intentional attack. That said, we don't know for sure whether it was intentional or whether it was our actual client that created this transaction. But I do not think it was an intentional attack.
Occam's razor says it was someone playing with GLisp and trying to figure out how to do transactions. So, which is what y'all are supposed to be doing. So don't think you did anything wrong if you were that person.
Thank you for testing it. This bug was going to come out eventually. I'd rather have had it now.
Back at 4 exabytes, right?
Yeah. I can share my screen real quick so you can see what we're talking about here. But and it's going to be weird because I've got the Zoom open as well. But this is the shark bite that we were referring to, and as you can see, you know, as we recovered, NetSpace came back pretty much out of a wall, and since then we've gained, I would say, about 40%, 50% more NetSpace than we had then. So
one of the questions in one of the various chats is, do we know how many people have upgraded? And I believe our crawler says about 75% are on the current version right now, and that was basically over the last 8 hours or so.
Yeah, so for community members, please be aware about new updates and try to update as often as possible, so that you can avoid these sorts of issues, which might decrease your farming rewards. Also, in the announcements, we will announce every new update, so that's a good channel to follow on Keybase.
We'll also probably start having those announcements mirrored to the status page. It may take a little bit to get that specific feature on, but we'd like you to be able to subscribe and know anything that's really important without having to do much work about it.
Yeah, there's a major change coming to release workflow to automate almost all of it, from when we cut a release to all of the little tendrils of things that we need to reach out to as an operations team now. That it should be done any week now, by the end of this week and into next week. So we are moving to a more resilient release process, a more resilient notification process, and that will definitely help with community awareness. There's a question here that I want to answer. Most system failures occur due to a series of small issues rather than one major issue, plane crashes, power systems, etc. How do you address this? From my perspective, good operations, good alarming, good testing, as Mariano said. We also are going to do chaos testing and things like that on the test net. We're going to create and break systems in a way that is safe, and we can know what states generate what sort of errors. I think the only way you can stay ahead of that sort of a snowball is to constantly be improving your toolkit and sharpening your tools, so to speak. And so that's where my mind goes as an operations engineer. And then, of course, Mariano mentioned some process improvements on the software side as well. So I think by marrying those together and being more intentional, we can eliminate a lot of the oversight flavored bugs that come out in larger systems that you're kind of speaking to. We've got another one about designing for an N-1 and beyond scenarios. Well, I mean, the network is designed to be completely decentralized. So, um, our stuff could completely go offline entirely. And as long as the chain and software is healthy, it will continue to run. Barring a major bug like this, which even with this bug, we were able to get it recovered and the chain moving again. I think that that's probably the worst case scenario is the chain gets slow, we see it, we recover it. We have, that's the best promise we can make to the community is that if there's a problem that's fatal to the software, we will have a fix out as soon as humanly possible. And everything else is designed to function in a way that one system cannot collapse the entire ecosystem, not even the Time Lord. I mean, as long as more than one Time Lord exists on Earth, everyone but one can be hit by a meteor and the chain should still continue to function.
Also, as you've seen from our 2 postmortems, we have a fully global team. There's literally almost no time that there isn't a developer or DevOps or even administrative team awake. So that helps a lot from a response perspective, and we'll probably be further standardizing that to some extent. Chia-NOC. So.
Got another question. Can the blockchain itself be used for regression testing, as in running the whole transaction during the release process or something of that kind?
Well, the answer is we're doing that. Most of our developers will actually run their changes against mainnet before they check them in. And testnet is a direct duplicate, and we do quite a bit of testing on testnet, to test all of this there. That's usually where we're doing most of that. If you look at our CI, you will see a pretty significantly in-depth test harness on most all of these things, and the additional testing that Mariano was talking about earlier is going to be in that CI. If you've ever done a PR on Chia-blockchain, you will watch a whole lot of Azure instances get started up.
Yes. There's 2 more I'm going to take here, and then I think we're coming up on the end of the time we had scheduled. When transactions went live, many farmers experienced CPU issues, Chia full node spiking. This seems to have been improved now. Are there more improvements in the works?
Yes, there's many improvements. So we do have 2 improvements coming in the next release, 1.1.6. One for Streamable, which is a serialization library we're using, and the other one is just other optimizations. That said, as usage goes up, the performance issues go up as well. So with the pooling release, there are going to be many, many more transactions on the blockchain. So we are looking into many different ways to optimize the full node so that even slow computers can run it. So our goal is to target the Raspberry Pi 4. And at the moment, the code might not be able to handle a full blockchain where every single block is full. But we aim to get closer and closer to that over the coming weeks, especially since the pooling release will really increase transactions. So that's one of our main priorities right now is the performance.
And that's an excellent segue into the last question. When pools?
Well, what we officially are saying is by the end of the month. I think what we can unofficially guide is that we're still on track, and it'll be any day now. There is reference pooling code that is rough and has bugs, but is there for people to comment on. This is for pool operators. And we are wrapping up the plot to singleton changes actively. It will probably not be this week. It might be next week, but we can't guarantee it. But we are very comfortable that by the end of May, you'll be able to plot to pool singleton and start building your pool to operate.
Thank you, Gene.
Yep, let's look around. Let's make sure we've got any other questions. Let's see. Great shirt. Thank you for the Hawaiian shirt. Appreciation. I forgot we were doing this today, or otherwise probably wouldn't have worn it. Okay, that looks like
yeah. I was going to say, it looks like we're pretty clear here. To reiterate, in case you missed it, Mariana's answer to speculation about what caused the negative transaction, likely somebody testing Chia-Lisp or some transaction properties. That's Occam's razor answer. It certainly could have been something malicious if it was. Great job, software catching it. Either way, I think that it was, the bug was going to come out eventually, and we're glad it came out early as opposed to, when the network is 100 exabytes or something like that.
Also, for those of you looking for the pool reference code, it's literally pool-reference repo in the Chia blockchain GitHub. Okay, with that, thanks very much. We hope not to see you on this particular topic set anytime soon, but we'll obviously continue to do this and continue to add additional resiliency. Everybody have a good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night. Bye, everybody.